So we're going to start with two short presentations and then a Q&A with our keynote speakers. And we're very, very lucky to have two amazing keynote speakers with us this morning. The first one of those is Alexia Jacques-Casanova, and I will be introducing Alexia in just a moment. And she'll tell you about her work with Artist and how she is very, very much involved in reaching audiences and building links and so on. And our second speaker, who I will then introduce, is Lily Chong, who is originally from Malaysia, I believe. Have I got that right? Yes, I'm nodding. Yes, she's nodding. That's good. But is currently based in Concertgebouw Museum, Library Museum in Brussels. So obviously a huge, wonderful story to tell us there. And Lee will also tell us a little bit about her work as a kind of introduction. What we've got in focus this morning, is how do we get to those non-visitor people? We know that people love to visit our cultural institutions, and we know quite a lot about the people that come through the door. We've got some good research, we've got some good evidence, but we also seriously want to know, who else is there? Who are we not reaching, and why? Why? Because we feel that there's such an interesting dialogue and conversation that could go on with people. So that's really what is in focus. But as I say, any questions, any points, pop them into chat as we go along so that we can have a really, really good conversation. Well, it's my great pleasure to ask Alexia to join us. And here she is on the screen. Alexia, welcome to Bang. And would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do and give us a little guided tour of your work?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'll share my screen just now so you can all see it. Excuse me. Is it working all right on your end? Yes. Okay, awesome. So to start with, maybe, yes, an introduction of myself. I am based in Saint-Nazaire, which is a city on the west coast of France. For those of you who know that area, it's close to the city of Nantes, which is maybe a bit more known throughout Europe and the rest of the world. And I founded my own company, which is just me. It's just a one-person company called Artist, and I founded it, I would think, about 6 or 7 years ago. And the reason why I started this company is I used to live abroad, and I'll talk about that a bit more in a second. And when I moved back to France, as I was looking for a job in audience engagement and more specifically participatory methods in audience engagement, I couldn't find one. It's not something that existed, still something that doesn't really exist in France, at least. Definitely did not exist 6 or 7 years ago. And so that's kind of why I started my own company, which is something I would have never thought of doing, and which can sound a bit paradoxical when you work for audience engagement, for the non-profit sector, and so on. But maybe we'll talk about that. So as part of Artist, I do 3 things. The first one is helping museums and libraries and cultural institutions in general, also libraries within museums. I help them with strategy. So having a plan for the next 5 years, having a strategy for audience engagement, and so on. And the way I do this, which is kind of unique, at least where I'm based, is that I only use participatory methods, which means that this strategy is not me as a consultant giving it to the museum or the library. It's something that we build together through collaborative workshops, either with the entire team of the museum, library, or sometimes when it's possible with the team and audience members and partners and so on. So this is for the strategy part. Of course, I also help them on audience engagement and co-creating new avenues for audience engagement with the audience that is linked to the activity that is at hand. And then I also help them with training. So I do train professionals on the theme of participatory methods and on audience engagement in general. So these are the three things that I do as part of my job. So just a few examples of what my job might look like on a daily basis. Again, as I've mentioned, I work for libraries, museums, cultural institutions in general. And among those, they all have very different specific topic that they focus on. So it could be a science museum, it could be an art museum, it could be a library with a private collection, or just a regular public library. You have here a few examples of those workshops that I mentioned and that I lead on a daily basis. And if I can go back just a little, I didn't mention, but so when I was studying, I studied anthropology as a BA in London, and I didn't know at the time, but that was going to become so relevant to the current job that I do, because anthropology is studying people's behavior. And we'll talk about this. The best thing you can do to better understand non-audiences is studying their behavior and studying how they interact with culture in general. So I had this background, and then I also had the amazing opportunity as a MA student at the Art Institute of Chicago to discover design thinking. I studied arts management, and my arts management teacher was very, very, very good friends with the people from IDEO. And for those of you who don't know IDEO, they're the design firm that basically democratized design thinking. And so my entire training as an arts manager was based on those methods, and I use them again today. I've brought in other things that have to do with design and equity in the mix, but these are the methods that I use on a daily basis, and they're very much relevant for participatory practices. So you have different examples here on the slide of what it can look like, different audiences that can be engaged, whether it's just about thinking about what they want to do within a museum or a library, or actually testing prototype. The photo on the bottom right is a prototype test for a museum, and we have the audience coming to test it and then giving us feedback about it. So I'll continue, and then maybe we can go back on those examples if you have any questions about these. Regarding the topic of today, there are two things that I thought were very important to tackle, or at least for me to share with you, because they're kind of the basis of my own understanding of my work. And the first idea, when we try and reach new audiences, people that don't come into our institutions, the first mistake that we make is that we think that if we just open our existing doors wider, people will just come and rush in. But if your audience doesn't come, it's because they don't see the door. It's because it's not relevant to them what you have to offer. And if some of you have read Nina Simon and her book on the art of relevance, she talks about this very, very well. And she has this great exercise that I encourage everyone to do. And she says, list the name of all the shops and bars and restaurants that are on your street. And then you'll realize how many of those shops and restaurants you've never seen, because they're not relevant to you. They don't appeal to the things that you know and are comfortable with. And so we have to realize that a library might be something that is not relevant to people. And so they will not see it. And the fact that you open your doors wider is not going to make a difference. You need to open different doors. And the best way to do this is to have people participate. And as I said, to understand how people think, how people behave, and in general, what triggers those people in a positive manner on a daily basis. So think about that, not opening your doors wider, just creating new ones, or doors somewhere else that are not at your library even. And then the other point that I wanted to mention, and we'll have time, I guess, to discuss this further, is to meet people on their own turf and on their own terms. And I have two examples that I use often. when we do training with professionals is the Laundromat project. It's a project that initiated in the early 2000s, so it's been a few years, and it's this great idea by someone from New York City who thought, where are the places where people are kind of captive, where they spend all the time, where they can't go anywhere and they have time on their hands. And that is also kind of a place where different people from different backgrounds get to meet. And that person thought of laundromats. And so the idea was to create cultural opportunities at laundromats. And these can be language classes, these can be art activities, this can be reading and book clubs. And it's now it's grown into this amazing nonprofit, and they do many, many incredible things. I encourage you to go and look at what they do. But this idea of going, basically meeting people where they are, I think is kind of the heart of what we should think about. And another example, maybe more focused on books, is the Bibliothèque de Rue, which is, even if you're not in France, you probably have similar initiatives that do that, and that basically just install libraries in the open air on the street. And this was created, at least in France, by a non-profit called ATD Carmonde, which is a non-profit focusing on ending poverty. Again, this has been a great success, only because we're meeting people on their own turf and on their own terms. So sorry, I've talked way too much already, but this was my introduction to the topic and to my work. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexia. What a wonderful way to start our webinar off, and such inspiring projects. So many questions are coming into my mind already, and I'm sure there are many questions or comments or thoughts arising also in the virtual room.